Do you want the Flood to return in future Halo Infinite DLC? Well, I sure as heck do. I've always loved the Flood as an enemy in Halo. They add a unique horror aspect and atmosphere to the game while simultaneously being able to separate themselves from other enemies in a gameplay sense. They also create opportunities for enemies to fight against each other as a third faction, which I think is really cool to see, but it also adds so much more uniqueness to the encounters in the game instead of always fighting the exact same enemy and no one else. The Sentinels also do this in every game, besides Halo Infinite, where they're fighting alongside the Banished for whatever reason. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I really want the Flood to return in future DLC. I think that with Halo 4 and 5, 343 Industries was kind of using the Prometheans as a sort of Flood replacement. But honestly, they didn't interest me nearly as much as the Flood do, both from a gameplay standpoint and what they add to the story and atmosphere. I really want the Flood to return, but only if 343 does them right. Now, there's a few schools of thought here, one being how they will be done from a horror and atmospheric standpoint. I've seen a lot of people voice their concerns about the Flood not being able to be as horrific or gruesome looking because the game has a T rating. When you kill the Flood in the original trilogy, you see limbs fall off and greenish-yellow Flood goo go everywhere. Now, I completely understand this concern. Having the Flood back but not have them be gruesome or gory would be incredibly disappointing. However, future DLC can totally have a different rating than the base game. According to ESRB's website, if a future DLC has content that would earn it a higher rating than the base game, it just needs to be submitted and it will receive its own rating. The current T rating is not stopping them from creating violent and gruesome Flood in the future. If they created Flood in the future that did not meet the standard of violence and gruesomeness, it would be due to other factors than the current rating, such as who 343 is trying to market the game towards. Another school of thought in designing the Flood right is from a gameplay standpoint, which is what I will be mainly focusing on for the remainder of the video. Traditionally, the Flood is a much more aggressive enemy. They can carry and fire weapons. However, they will often lower their weapons, move towards you, and will prioritize violently hitting you to death. Enemies like the Infection forms, Carrier forms, and the Flood tank Pure form seen in Halo 3 entirely rely on getting close to you to do damage. The entire appeal to the Flood from a gameplay standpoint is that they are incredibly aggressive and will try to overwhelm you by their sheer numbers and keep you on your toes. That is what gives the Flood their identity from a gameplay standpoint. These specific mechanics also really help to immerse the player in the horror aspect of the Flood. So, as you probably saw by my title, I believe that a permanent grapple shot would ruin what makes the Flood what they are. But why do I believe this? Well, just look at everything that Halo Infinite's permanent grapple allows you to do. You have a tool with unlimited uses that allows you to bypass any and all level design and allows you to gain altitude and travel around very quickly. This has repercussions for many encounters and enemies in Halo Infinite, but right now I want to focus on just one: Brute Berserkers. Unlike previous Halos with Brute Berserkers, only a few brutes in Halo Infinite have the berserking mechanic, and unlike previous Halos, these brutes in Halo Infinite are always berserking. The grapple being an unlimited use item ruined Brute Berserkers in Halo Infinite. The thing that makes berserking brutes interesting and unique is that they will drop their weapons and focus on brutally hitting you to death. I think this mechanic was a lot more interesting in Halo 2, where every enemy could berserk and would do so when you killed every brute in the room except for the last one, because this actually gave them a reason to be berserking. I also preferred the animation in Halo 2 where they got down on all fours and behaved very animalistic as opposed to a developed species like they are. And this is unlike Halo Infinite where they are simply just running at you. In Halo Infinite, Brute Berserkers are actually the fastest and technically the most lethal version of this enemy yet, even if they don't convey this very well in the animation they've been given. Many enemies in this game were given many buffed mechanics because of the grapple and other equipment items. In the case of Brute Berserkers, they've been given much faster movement speed than the player's base movement speed, and they were likely given this increased speed because of the grapple existing as an item with unlimited uses. Because of this, you cannot reliably fight this enemy without using the grapple unless they are a long way away from you, simply because of the increased speed they were given. So, we have established that this enemy has been designed around a permanent grapple in Halo Infinite, and the intended way to fight them is to use the grapple. Because of this enemy was ruined in Halo Infinite. An unlimited grapple gives the player the ability to instantly gain a height advantage at any time and at nearly any place they want. You are intended to use the grapple against Brute Berserkers, but when you do it, this enemy ironically becomes way too easy to fight. The Berserkers prioritize hitting you, but the grapple makes it so you can get away from them so easily and avoid what literally defines this enemy from a gameplay standpoint. What made this enemy both interesting and threatening now no longer applies because of how easily you can get away from them, but you also cannot reliably fight them without the grapple because of the immense speed increase they've been given. The speed increase is completely meaningless when you can use the grapple to gain a lot of altitude quickly, and it's also made meaningless when you use the grapple on a flat surface to get away because of how easy it makes getting away. Now, you might think that they could have made the Brute Berserkers even faster than they are to be closer or equivalent to the grapple speed, but this also would not work. For one, this would do nothing to change your ability to gain verticality quickly. On a level surface, however, in order to fight this enemy, you actually have to shoot your gun, which requires you to be moving at base movement speed no matter what. If you are grappling away from them on a flat surface, you have to turn around and shoot them to even kill them, right? But if they are given a speed nearly equivalent to the grapple, then when you turn around, you won't be able to shoot at them because they would be right behind you when you turn around and would be able to hit you as soon as you stop grappling. It would be a lot like how in multiplayer, if someone's sprinting at you with a sword or gravity hammer, there really isn't a whole lot you can do but sprint away because their speed is greater than the speed you can backstep and shoot. But even if you do sprint away from another player with a sword or hammer, they can just keep sprinting towards you at the same speed that you are sprinting away from them and just kill you once you stop sprinting. A similar thing would happen if Brute Berserkers were given a similar speed to the grapple. Have I convinced you that the grapple shot ruined Brute Berserkers in Halo Infinite? I hope so, because this ties directly into the Flood, and you might have guessed where I was going with this. Combat forms, carrier forms, infection forms, tank pure forms, and even stalker forms all rely on being able to get close to the player and overwhelm the player. The Flood are generally threatening for similar reasons as Brute Berserkers. However, this trait that makes them threatening now applies to nearly the entire Flood faction. So, if 343 Industries was to bring the Flood back in a future campaign DLC, I really hope that they implement the grapple shot, as well as every other equipment item, as a limited use ability that you have to find on the map. A grapple with unlimited uses would have almost the exact same effect on the Flood as it had on Brute Berserkers in Halo Infinite. Nearly the entire identity of this faction relies on them swarming you and getting in close proximity to the player. A grapple would give you the ability to simply get away from them either by gaining a vertical advantage or by quickly moving in the opposite direction. You could easily get away from them when they try to surround and overwhelm you, and you could continuously get away over and over due to the incredibly fast recharge, which would make them a far less threatening enemy faction. Alternatively, if the grapple was not in the game, or it was given limited uses, you would not be able to do this in every situation, and there would probably be entire missions without a grapple. So you would still have to be able to fight the Flood without it when you don't have a grapple, and you would have to strategically use the grapple when you do have it because it would quickly run out. You might be thinking that they could simply introduce new Flood pure forms to act as a counter to the grapple, and this is true. However, that Flood pure form is only one type of Flood that you will encounter, so there will certainly be a significant number of areas where these enemies are not present. Even if they add more than one pure form specifically made for the grapple, these enemies will likely not show up in a lot of areas where the Flood exists. More importantly, however, if they do add pure forms specifically made for the grapple, they would not be balanced when you are actually firing your weapon, which has to be when the player is moving at base movement speed. So many enemies in Halo Infinite were designed around the player always using the permanent grapple and were given unfair mechanics when you were actually shooting at them. Even more importantly though, if we look beyond just potential new pure forms that might be added, there are still the traditional Flood forms, such as combat forms, infection forms, and carrier forms, which have been present in every single game with the Flood and will undoubtedly return with the Flood, and will make up the majority of the Flood's enemies that you fight. This means that the majority of the Flood would be subject to being abused by a permanent grapple, and the threat presented by them would decrease dramatically. There is one more possibility that you might have thought of, and that is to make the combat forms, infection forms, and carrier forms somehow designed around the grapple. Well, for starters, I can't really imagine how they would possibly design infection forms or carrier forms around a grapple. I just don't see that possibly happening in any way. The infection forms and carrier forms would certainly lose what makes them threatening and interesting. The only enemy of the three that could realistically be designed around the grapple would be the combat forms. However, what would they really do to them? They would probably be given faster movement speed, just like Brute Berserkers were, making it so you can't reliably fight them without the grapple. But this proved to not be enough in the case of Brute Berserkers. Unless they fundamentally changed this enemy, the grapple would greatly reduce what makes them threatening and unique as an enemy faction. The grapple as an unlimited ability gives you way too many easy traversal options that you always have access to. Like I said, the way that this enemy would be designed would need to be fundamentally changed. So in that case, I have a question to ask of you. If they bring the Flood back but fundamentally change what made them interesting in the first place, are we really getting the Flood back? I would argue that we are not, because they would not resemble the Flood that we know and love, and would not resemble the Flood that we want to come back to the franchise in the first place. That just about wraps up this video. I really want the Flood to return, but a permanent grapple would really ruin what made them so great. Brute Berserkers lost what made them interesting, and the same would happen to the Flood if the grapple isn't changed to a limited use item. I would like to clarify that I do like pure forms and want them to be expanded upon as a concept for the Flood. What I completely hate is enemies being designed around innate abilities. I still want the grapple to exist in the game, but only as a limited use item that doesn't exist in every area or on every level. If they make it a limited use item but put it all over the game, then it really isn't much of a limited use item. There are a multitude of other problems that a permanent grapple causes, which can be seen in Halo Infinite. I'm currently writing a script for a very long video where I will cover all of these reasons and much more. Before I end today's video, I would like to invite you all to join my Discord server. There will be a link for that in the description below. and also to follow me on Twitch, and there will also be a link for that in the description below. That's going to do it for me today, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye.